our next guest, Kip Eidelberg, Senior VP for Government and Industry Relations for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, has got some thoughts on this, and he joins us right now. Kip, welcome to AgriTalk. I'm glad to have you here.
Hey, Chip, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. So, is it a legitimate concern among some in rural America that the White House might just be overlooking their needs?
You know, Chip, it's a great question, and I think so. And I would even argue that it's not just necessarily relating to this White House, but I think you could make the case that for far too long, our lawmakers in Washington have not prioritized strengthening rural America. I mean, it's pretty simple. A healthy, vibrant rural America is not a Democratic or Republican priority. It is a national priority, and we need to make it one.
Right. Okay, dig into that a little bit deeper for us, if you would, Kip. Why is it such a national priority? I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but why is it any different than the populations living on the East Coast or the West Coast? Why? What differentiates it?
Well, that's a good question. Let me address that two ways, if I may. Let's start with our industry, because I think that might provide a good enough example. So, equipment manufacturers, our member companies make the equipment that builds, powers, and feeds the world. But, and this is the important part here, the 2.8 million men and women of our industry, they're not just welders and fabricators and machinists, Chip. Some of them are farmers and ranchers. And 1 in 3 of them live and work in rural communities across the country, compared to just 1 in 5 people overall in the United States. So our industry is not only deeply connected to rural America, but we are a big part of it. And so for lawmakers, when they look at our industry, far too often they think about just the specific policy priorities that may impact our industry, but not the people that are part of that industry. And I think that is the same for a lot of other industries that have a heavy footprint in rural America. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing with you. I think, agriculture in many ways is different. I get that. But in so many ways, it's the same as other industries out there. And I think there are other industries that are feeling the same thing that you're talking about, Kip. What kind of solution should we be looking for in how might the White House, I'll just say it, might the Democrat Party kind of narrow the divide with rural America?
Well, I think President Biden, and by the way, we have encouraged him and his administration to do just this, would do well to pursue a targeted rural economic development strategy in partnership, and this is critical, with rural communities. So it is not just prescriptive, it is a collaborative approach to invest in their unique assets with the goal of giving young people, but all people in general, more options to live, work, and raise the next generation of rural America. And so what does that mean? Well, we believe that such a strategy should advance policies that provide farmers and ranchers with the tools they need to manage risk, crop insurance, for example, open up more markets for U.S. commodities. Trade is critically important to not just our industry, but to growers. Ensure a regulatory system that is fair and transparent so that we can plan accordingly and be part of the process. Enable the technology that farmers need to grow more food while improving the environment. And then finally, that is to prioritize the long-term investment in rural infrastructure, which is, suffering for decades from neglect.
Right. Where does connectivity fit into all of this, Kip? Because if we're going to keep young minds, young farm kids thinking about staying in rural America, connectivity has got to be ramped up significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that transportation infrastructure improvement is perhaps the most obvious need in rural communities. And by the way, 30%, in fact, over 30% Chip of rural roads are in poor or mediocre condition. But setting aside transportation infrastructure, that is one priority. They really need to make a significant investment into providing not just expanded broadband to connect rural communities to the outside world. That is important. But there are other things, too, and you know this, providing clean water, quality, affordable housing for rural families, and enhancing our ability to supply reliable and secure power. All of those areas, and it's a big task that they're facing here. All of these areas need to be addressed, but I think, and you mentioned it, I think connectivity is probably, the second most important one. The reality is that millions of Americans do not have access to reliable high-speed broadband. And if you're a farmer, rancher, a student, a lower-income family, or someone who lives in a rural community, that puts you at an enormous disadvantage. And we've seen it with the COVID-19 pandemic and, the inability to access telehealth, for example.
Yeah. I tell you what, the improved connectivity that I've got here at the broadcast bunker has absolutely changed my life. It's changed
Right.
It's changed my life, or it's changed the life of my parents, who can rely more on telemedicine now. It is so, it's one of those things, Kip, that you just think to yourself, oh man, it would be so nice if I had it. And then when you got it, you realize what you didn't have before. People have got to push for this harder.
They do, and I can give you a concrete example. Back in the days when I was traveling around the country visiting with our member companies, I remember being in Oklahoma visiting with one of our companies down there, and one of the gentlemen who works there told me that his wife had to travel an hour and a half twice a week to go from where they lived to Perry, Oklahoma, where the company is based, just to get reliable broadband so that they could pay their bills, do some online shopping, download, resources for their kids who are in school. I mean, how in the world are we going to create more good-paying jobs for rural America if we can't even access the internet in a reliable way?
Man, keep telling the story there, Kip. I love that one. Biden has laid out a plan, Build Back Better in rural America. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, we are pleased that they rightly note the crumbling state of our country's infrastructure. And we mentioned those 30% of rural roads, right, that are in just poor or mediocre condition. And, equipment manufacturers, we've experienced this deterioration firsthand. It jeopardizes jobs. It limits our agricultural competitiveness and the health of rural families. And I think what they've got to do right now is they've got to move beyond this idea of infrastructure as a partisan issue. It is not a partisan issue. It is not a Democratic issue. It is not a Republican issue. It is a common sense issue. And so we need them to set aside that partisanship and find a solution to rebuild and modernize our infrastructure, our rural infrastructure in particular. And a long-term investment is not just an investment in those roads and bridges, right, those locks and dams and waterways and ports. It's an investment in our country. It will create millions of family-sustaining jobs. It will jumpstart our economy and put us on a path to full recovery. And what I would tell the Biden administration and Democrats and Republicans alike in Congress is that they all say the same thing. They want to create more well-paying middle-class jobs. Well, we agree with that. How do you do that?
Okay.
Well, you invest in our infrastructure.
Okay. All right. Excellent. What do you think of Secretary Vilsack 2.0 back at USDA?
Well, listen, equipment manufacturers, we're pleased to see him nominated and confirmed. He is someone who knows our industry well. I think he knows rural America well. He understands the importance of American agriculture. And let's be honest about it, American agriculture truly feeds the world and creates millions of jobs. And I think he understands that. Now, it remains to be seen, obviously, which policies he is going to champion. As the Secretary of Agriculture, we hope that we can be a part of whatever effort he launches. We certainly hope that he will consult actively with rural America, our industry, farmers, ranchers, et cetera, because it's got to be a team effort. It cannot be a centralized Washington down approach. It's got to be in close collaboration with rural America. And so, look, he gets trade. Trade is a key way to create more markets for farmers, ranchers, and equipment manufacturers. 30% of all equipment built here in America is destined for trade, right? He understands that. I think he gets the importance of biofuels, and I think he gets the importance of investing in those communities. So, we are cautiously optimistic.
Good. Kip, this was fun. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. We need to do it again sometime.
Hey, likewise, thanks for having me on, and happy to be back anytime, Chip.
All right, sounds great. That is Kip Eiderberg. He is the Senior VP of Government and Industry Relations for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers.